Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beef Up Front here on Pick Swap Media. Ryan Coyle, joined alongside Joe Kmetz for the Week 3 college football preview. And Joe, we're coming off a great week for the two of us on our picks of the week, our lock of the week, and our dog of the day. We both hit. Last week, I had Mizzou, Kansas over. I think it was 47.5. That game goes way over, one of the best games of the weekend. You had Texas Tech minus 47.5. They win by 48 points. Right there on the dot. I actually bet it at minus 48.5, so I lost by the hook there. It goes to show you, get your plays in early in the week, but a big-time cover there for you. And then dog of the day, we both had our outright winners last week. You had Mississippi State plus 200 on the money line. I think they were plus 6.5 against Arizona State. They win that game outright. I had South Florida plus 17.5. I didn't give out the money line, but I did think that they would keep it close, keep it within that 17. But they go down to the swamp and actually beat Florida outright. So an outright winner there. I looked earlier. If we had parlayed both of those two on the money line, USF and Mississippi State, it was like plus 2,200. So if you were listening to us last week and you took our plays, you probably made out pretty well last week. We both had Oklahoma winning and covering. We both had Ole Miss winning and covering, but Ole Miss loses wins the game outright, but loses the cover on a meaningless field goal at the end. We both had Iowa State minus 2.5. I think, that hits. I had the under. We both had the over. We both had Baylor plus 3.5 winning outright. We both had Illinois minus 2.5. We both had JMU plus 14.5. I didn't tally up our standings, but this was probably one of our better weeks ever, Joe. So good fortune here at the beginning of the season as we roll into week 3. How are we doing? Big high school football debut on Friday night?
Yeah, big game Friday night. Your Derby Red Raiders, America's football team, are hosting the Northwest Catholic Lions in a non-conference showdown. Where they were almost a playoff team last year. Derby was not. We were 4-6 last year, rebuilding right now. Really excited for our first actual game. One thing that's cool about Connecticut, but also kind of stinks, is that we base the regular season, the last game of the season is on Thanksgiving. That's a regular season game, which is cool for tradition and rivalries, but it sucks when it's September 12th and we're playing our first game of the season. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited and ready to get into talking about this week's slate.
Yeah, pretty good slate. I think last week we saw some chaos, certainly. We see Florida go down to South Florida. We see Arizona State lose against Mississippi State in a pretty awesome game. And we talked about that last week, where there wasn't that many great matchups. You were sure to see some chaos. That Mizzou-Kansas game was really good, back and forth. Baylor-SMU goes to a couple overtimes, back and forth. Syracuse-UConn goes to overtime. So there was a lot of good games last week, but pretty loaded slate this week, I think, compared to last week. So excited to get into it. Our lock of the week, our dog of the day, we'll do at the end of the show, as always. But, Joe, we're going to start it off Saturday in the ACC with a team that has had a head-scratching start to the season with number 12 Clemson. They're at 1-1. Sneak out a win over Troy last week. Obviously lose the opener to LSU and didn't look great in that one. A slow start for a team that a lot of people have in the national title, but they'll travel to a very stingy Georgia Tech team who's also 2-0, or who is 2-0 to start the year. 12 o'clock kick on ESPN. Clemson's a 3.5-point road favorite here. Over-under coming in at 58.5, Joe. Do you think Georgia Tech can win this one outright?
I do, and I'm actually picking them to win this game 28-21. So I'll take Georgia Tech plus the 3.5. I'm going to go under 58.5. I think 58.5 is a lot of points. I don't think that'll happen. I really love the under in this game. But that being said, there just looks like there's something fundamentally wrong with Clemson. You lose a tough one to LSU, and who knows? Maybe that game against Troy was just kind of like hey, we're emotionally, we're feeling bad about ourselves. We, let a game against LSU kind of slip through our hands. We got our big conference opener next week on the road. Who knows? Maybe they weren't showing everything. Maybe they were just kind of, not going 100% letdown spot. And, would it shock me if Clemson won this game by 2 touchdowns? Not really. I think Georgia Tech's going to win. I think they're, if not the better team, they're right there on par with them. But Atlanta's going to be rocking for this game. The fans are going to show out. Anytime you get a chance, Coyle, we talk about it all the time. Depending on the conference and the sport, with the SEC basketball, it's Kentucky. But with ACC football, you get Clemson coming to town. It's probably your biggest conference game of the season, excluding a rivalry game. But that being said, I think Georgia Tech fans are going to be, locked in. I think it's going to be a really awesome atmosphere. I wish this game was later in the day. noon kickoff kind of sucks a little bit. But I'm going to go with the Yellow Jackets here, 28-21. And I really think Georgia Tech now with Clemson, looking a little bit weak. I know you have Miami and Florida State, but there's there's definitely a path, especially if Georgia Tech wins this game, to sneak into the ACC title game and potentially make the playoff.
Yeah, this is I think kind of the season definer for the Georgia Tech team because looking at their schedule, I think I had them actually going 10-2, if not 9-3. But that goes to show you, like, if they win this game, they have a very doable schedule in front, and Clemson has full on panic mode after this because Clemson would have to, I think, if they lose this game, go undefeated the rest of the way to give themselves any chance of an at-large, but to at least have a chance to make the title game. Maybe they can slip up one more game because that LSU loss was a non-conference game, but they also have South Carolina at the end of the season that could prevent them from making the college football playoff as well. So should be a lot of emphasis on this one for Clemson. No more room for slip up, but I'm right there with you, Joe. I really like Georgia Tech to pull out the outright upset in this one. They're a tough team. They're a physical team. They're a gritty team. They have all those kind of adjectives to them that helps you pull off an upset like this. Clemson's by far more talented, but Georgia Tech just has kind of that it factor to them, especially with Haynes King at quarterback, Brent Key at the head coaching spot. I love that duo there, and those guys have shown the ability to pull off some upsets. We remember even last year, they took Georgia to 7-8 overtimes. They've shown the ability to take these kind of top teams to the brink. They break Florida State last year in week 0 over in Ireland, and we saw how their season goes after that. Georgia Tech, it's just kind of that team you talked about with Illinois last week where they kind of just wear you down, and I think this toughness kind of helps them prevail in games like these. They did it against Colorado in week 1 after starting out really slow. Love Georgia Tech to win this one. I think it's their Super Bowl plus 3.5. Give me that for sure. But I like Georgia Tech to win this game outright. Give me 24-21 Tech. So Tech plus 3.5, and I will go under 58.5 there. All right, we go to the SEC now. Number 6, Georgia at 2-0 goes to Knoxville to play number 15, Tennessee, who's also 2-0. 3:30 kick on ABC. Georgia, 3.5-point favorite. Over under is 50.5. Any chance the Vols pull off this one at home, Joe?
I mean, there's definitely a chance. I'm not going to pick it, though. I'm going to go with Georgia here, 24-17, mainly because I don't really know what I'm getting yet with Tennessee. Yes, they, had it easy against Syracuse, but we saw Syracuse, struggle with UConn. They needed a crazy comeback to pull that game out at home at the Carrier Dome. This game being in Knoxville is crazy. The fact that this is also not a night game, I understand, you have LSU, Florida, which we'll get to later. As a night game, but it does suck. I think it'd be really cool to see this game be a primetime game. That being said, I just think Georgia's a better team. Another team where really we haven't seen a whole lot out of this year's team, but I still think Georgia defensively, I think they're going to be pretty good. I think they're going to keep it a low-scoring game. I like the under. I'm going Georgia 24, Tennessee 17. I think Tennessee's going to really struggle. Like I said, their offenses look great against Syracuse and East Tennessee, but they're a totally different class in Georgia. I think Georgia's going to win this game, even though I don't really know a whole heck of a lot yet between these two teams.
Yeah, I was saying it to McClay earlier. Like, I think Joey Aguilar has been a great story thus far. He's looked awesome. He's fit the system well. But this is the big boys now. Like, where we're even last week against East Tennessee and the week before against Syracuse. Those are still like App State level opponents. Now you're getting the Georgia Bulldogs. Now you're getting Kirby Smart. Now you're getting first and second round draft picks up and down the board on that defense. Let's see what you can do against that team now. I know they're at home. It feels like they got some momentum on their side. It still feels like people are sleeping on Georgia. And Georgia maybe is not at full speed, full steam ahead yet. And if this game was later in the season, Georgia might be able to dominate in this one, but maybe Tennessee early in the year is able to pick them off. A lot of kind of signs there pointing to a potential upset, but I just don't see it. I like Georgia to win this one on the road. I think they cover as well. Very surprising. This one opened at like 7.5, and is steamed all the way down to 3.5. So a lot of money coming in on Tennessee. Confusing to me because Tennessee's going to be without their top 2 corners. I think Georgia might be able to throw on this defense a little bit. Sure, it's going to be a rocking atmosphere. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere there, but I just don't see it. One of those situations where Georgia and Kirby has owned this kind of offense over the past few years, X amount of years since he's been the coach there. So one of those situations where prove me wrong, like let me see it before I go out there and pick this game as an upset. But I'll go with the safer pick here, I think, and take Georgia to win and cover 31-24. So Georgia minus 3.5, over 50.5 there. All right, maybe the story of the year so far in college football, number 18, South Florida at 2-0. They now own ranked wins over Boise State and Florida, going to Florida last week and winning. Awesome story there. They traveled to number 5, Miami, 2-0, who, as we know, knocked off Notre Dame week 1 and then obviously blew out Bethune-Cookman last week. But Carson Beck and the offense looked pretty sharp to start the season. 4:30 kick here on the CW network. Miami's a 16.5-point favorite, over under 55.5. Joe, did Vegas not learn their lesson by making South Florida this big of a dog in back-to-back weeks?
Yeah, I am surprised to see the spread so high. That's actually why I'm going to take Miami to cover the spread. I'm going Miami 45, USF 28. I think they'll cover by the hook. This is not like an indictment on South Florida. I think they're a great team, and I actually think they're pretty, they can hang with Miami. My whole thing that concerns me is this is your now third straight high emotion, high intensity game. You smoked Boise State at home, nationally broadcast game, top 25 team, the preseason group of 5 favorite to make the playoff. You smoke them, you make a statement. Then you go and play an in-state, I'm not going to say rival, but a big in-state school, one of the big schools in Florida, one of the big programs in Florida. A lot of those kids, even with the portal now, it's like, oh, I think I'm going to have to be at Florida. They said no, now here I am at USF. You win that game on a walk-off field goal in the swamp. Not that I don't think Alex Golish is going to have those guys ready to go down in Miami. It's just really tough to get up for 3 straight games, especially against this Miami team, which is a top 5 team. Carson Beck looked great, against Notre Dame. This is also a surprise opportunity for them now. Like, hey, they're getting a very, very, big quality non-conference game. If they win this game against a team that right now are the favorites, even if Miami beats them by 50, still going to be the favorites to be the G5 rep in the playoff. That could be really good for Miami. I just think at the end of the day, Miami's going to be a little bit too much. I love Byron Brown. I still would be shocked if USF, even if they lose this game, can make noise in the American and, be sitting there on conference championship weekend. But I just think this is a really tough spot for them. Miami's coming off a game against a Bethune-Cookman team where they got their, come down from beating Notre Dame. USF is still riding that emotional high. If anything, I would look into like USF first half money line, or excuse me, not money line, like first half spread, then Miami full game spread or Miami even second half spread, because I just think it's going to be one of those things. USF's going to run out of juice. But that being said, if they pull off this upset, they should
they be number
legitimately
1
be. I don't know about number 1 because I know the AP won't vote them number 1, but they should at very least be a like top 5 to 10 team, because no other team in the country has that kind of resume even close. LSU would probably be the next closest if they were to beat Florida, because Ohio State, obviously the big one against Texas, but Grambling and Parker Navarro on the Ohio Bobcats probably not going to get that done. But I think Miami's going to end up winning this game and covering by the hook, even though I wouldn't be shocked if South Florida keeps it close again.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the spread in this one, I could certainly see a lot of people, just like I said at the beginning, like, wow, USF's this big of a dog again after they just beat Florida. I think that game kind of said more about Florida and kind of the program that they are. I thought that they were overhyped coming into this season. I don't think they really deserved that number next to their name. But I still was surprised to see South Florida pull off that upset outright. I thought it would at least just be like a touchdown game in Florida's favor. That is, and it puts Florida in a really tough spot now, because Florida now, we'll talk about later, but has LSU, and then they have Miami, I think, next week as well. So really tough schedule coming up for Florida. South Florida has done everything they can. Like, even if you walk out of this game with a loss, I think you put yourself in great position as long as you take care of business in the American to kind of put yourself in the driver's seat there for that potential G5 playoff spot. And they're far and away the best team resume in there so far, but maybe even the entire country. I think they're going to be good enough to keep this one close. I'm interested to see what Miami can do against another formidable opponent. We saw them look pretty good against Notre Dame, almost gave the game away at the end. And then you touched on it, Bethune-Cookman last week. I think that was a 55.5-point spread. Nothing much was expected out of that one except an absolute beatdown. So let's see what they can do against a South Florida team that's looked really good so far, really stingy. I'm going to take South Florida to cover this again. I don't think they're going to win it outright, but I like them plus 16.5. I'll go Miami 31-23. So South Florida plus 16.5 and under 55.5 there. That was our G5 game of the week as well. Kind of cool to get them mixed in there for a ranked opponent with Miami. But now we head to another big-time non-conference matchup with number 16 Texas A&M at 2-0 at number 8 Notre Dame, who's 0-1 coming off a early season bye. 7:30 kick on NBC. Notre Dame, 6.5-point favorite over under 49.5, Joe. I was surprised to see the number this big.
Yeah, I am as well, and I almost think that's more like Vegas is kind of seeing, hey, Notre Dame had an extra week to prepare for this A&M team. A&M played two, not bad, but I'm not going to say great teams either with, G5 team-wise, like UTSA and Utah State, winning 42-24, then 44-22. Nothing really impressive there. For a little while, Labor Day weekend, they were kind of in a dogfight with UTSA. They pulled away late. That's opening game of the season, whatever. I think Notre Dame is going to win this game 28-21, ultimately because like I was kind of alluding to, you had that extra week off. You're giving Marcus Freeman and that staff an extra week to prepare, to scout, to get ready for this team. And also it's a do or die game for Notre Dame. Because if Notre Dame loses this game, you're starting 0-2. And then if you look at their schedule the rest of the way, like even if they were to win out, you kind of need a little bit of help to put yourself in relevance with, Boise State losing that game to South Florida. I'm not saying Boise State still isn't a good team. You have a tough game at Arkansas, even if Arkansas is not that good. Notre Dame is going to an SEC school. Arkansas is going to be ready to roll. At Pitt doesn't look terrible. Like, they don't look like terrible teams, but then you really look at the teams left on their schedule. No teams currently ranked in the top 25. Who knows about USC when the time comes? Syracuse 1-1, but I think Notre Dame's going to win this game. Do or die spot. CJ Carr looked a lot better in the second half. Honestly, and that's kind of what you want from a freshman making his first start. You want to kind of see him settle down throughout the game. And I mean, he had them at the very end of it being right there with a chance to win the game. Miami hits a field goal with a minute left. You lose by 3. It sucks. Is what it is. Now you get to come home. I think Notre Dame, they're going to get the crowd into it. The one thing that concerns me is that the offensive and defensive lines did not look great. Like, Miami beat us in the trenches, so I think that's going to be something to watch with this game. If A&M can do that, it's going to be a long night for Notre Dame. But I think ultimately they'll get it done. I think this will be, a tight game, maybe even tied going into the fourth quarter again. I think the big game plan this week is going to be get the ball to Jeremiah Lovemore, because he only had like 10 touches last week, which is just not going to get it done when you have a guy who is being talked about as a potential Heisman candidate. You got to give him the ball more, especially after how he was last season. But I think Notre Dame's going to bounce back, get this win, 28-21. I'll take him to cover, and I'll take the under by the hook.
Yeah, I think a must-win game here if you're Notre Dame, and I think if you're Texas A&M, it's kind of like one of those cherry-on-top games. Like, you're going to have plenty of opportunities, get some big-time wins in the SEC. But if you're Texas A&M and you win this game, I think you're certainly in the driver's seat to go to the college football playoff. I had them as a 9-3 squad coming into the year, but I had this one chalked up as a loss. If you're able to win this one and you find your way to 10-2, you'll certainly be in. 9-3, there's still even a chance if you win this game. Notre Dame, they could go 10-2 and I think miss the playoff, because outside of this game here and the game that they already had, the opportunity they already had against Miami, I don't know if they'll have a ranked team on the schedule the rest of the way, except maybe USC, as you were touching on. So a huge game here for Notre Dame, major emphasis on this one. They get the bye week kind of to recover, and they already beat this Texas A&M team. I know it's two different squads, but they were able to beat them last year at College Station. Gives me a little bit of faith that they're able to get this one done at home. But I do like A&M to cover. I think 6.5 is a lot. I think this is a defensive slugfest too. Really like the under 49.5. Give me Notre Dame 24-20. So A&M plus 6.5, under 49.5. All right, we got Florida at 1-1 off that major disappointing loss to South Florida last week. At number 3, LSU, who is 2-0. 7:30 kick on ABC. LSU 6.5-point favorite here at night. Over/under is 50.5. Joe, I think there's a ton of pressure, obviously, on Billy Napier this week, but also a ton of pressure on DJ Lagway, a guy that's been hyped up as one of, if not the best quarterback prospects to come into college football over the past 5 to 10 years. And I think he's looked pretty bad over these first 2 games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think there's a lot of pressure on him this weekend? And do you think he's able to pull through and get a huge upset victory on the road here?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He has, been a guy that people have talked about Heisman candidate, a guy who could lead a team to a national title. Like there were people picking Florida as like a sleeper team, even in the AC, or excuse me, even in the SEC with how tough that schedule is year in and year out. And this is a schedule for the rest of the way for Florida where, everyone was talking about how tough it was last year, but this year, now with this loss to South Florida, who is clearly better than what people thought in the preseason. But at the end of the day, and you've been hearing it a lot, Florida is not supposed to lose to South Florida. Just not supposed to happen. If they lose this game, especially if it gets a little bit ugly, you could be looking at a Florida team coming up. They're at number 5 Miami. They host Texas. They're at A&M. They get what should be a cakewalk game. I'm putting that in parentheses with Mississippi State, who just beat Arizona State. Then you go Georgia, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, home against Tennessee, home against Florida State. This could get ugly really, really quick for Florida. If they were to drop this game, especially not close. I think at this point, good or bad, I think Billy Napier has to go. I just think it's the same song and dance with him. And, all the goodwill that he kind of banked up for finishing how he did with the team last year with the schedule, he lost it against South Florida. And now you have a game, you're going to Death Valley. LSU definitely smells blood in the water. This could be another statement game for them. I do think they're going to win the game. I'm saying 34-30, ultimately because I think Florida's going to kind of be like, hey, we got to go balls to the walls here. I was kind of saying at Notre Dame, Florida is in a do or die spot, not necessarily because of the schedule, because there are plenty of wins where Florida turns it around. Like you could make the argument Florida could go 8-4 and still sneak into the playoff with their schedule. But it's just one of those things. Like you lose this game and you get embarrassed, going to be really tough walking around Gainesville, walking around the school, trying to hold your head up with pride, where that Gator, with some pride after you're just getting smoked. And it's just the same thing over and over again with Billy Napier. And from what, like everything I hear on like podcasts and stuff, it seems like he's like a good guy. It seems like he's, like he's doing all the things right off the field. He just can't get it to translate on the field, which is a big problem. That being said, I think Nussmeier's going to have a big day for LSU. I think the Tigers, offensively are going to look really good. That was just a very obvious letdown spot against Louisiana Tech last week. Like I'm not taking that close game, as any concern. I think LSU is a legit national title contender, and I don't think it'd be the worst idea to actually bet them to win the national title right now. So I'm going to go LSU here, 34-30. They'll take care of Florida, and I'm going to go with the over. I think the over is very low. I love the 50.5.
Yeah, what you were saying about Billy Napier, I think last year down the stretch, I think that they played really well, and I think the main reason why I kind of kept the job, he was basically like, all right, I got this 5-star kid, I got this next up quarterback. Look how well we were able to play down the stretch. We're going to carry over this momentum and kind of use that as a building block, as like a platform to go into next year. And sure, they started out with the big week 1 win over LIU, and then last week they pissed the bed against South Florida. Like now the pressure's on. You were supposed to be a 2-0 going into this game. This probably would have been like number 3 versus number like 10 or 11, and now here you are unranked and you're facing an uphill climb basically for the rest of the season. Can they right their wrongs? They showed the ability to pull off some upsets last year, but I'm just not picking against someone who just lost to South Florida at home to go into LSU, arguably the hardest environment in all of college football, especially at night for a night game, and pull off an upset here. So give me LSU here. Keep it simple, 30-23. I agree. Florida probably puts up a fight because it's kind of like do or die time already for them here in week 3. Because if you lose this one, you're 1-2. You have maybe room for one more loss the rest of the season. Maybe because maybe if you lose one more game and you're able to go to the SEC title game by chance, because I do think there's a good chance this year in the SEC we see more 9-3, 10-2s than 10-2, 11-1s, and you kind of got teams fighting for those last spots because people are kind of knocking each other off because it doesn't really look like thus far, at least, that there's a super dominant team in the conference. So with all that being said, though, I do like LSU to win this one at home. I feel like it's dumb to pick against them there. So give me the -6.5 over 50.5. I'll go 30-23 LSU there. All right, final game, and what I think has a chance to maybe be even the most exciting game of all these. This is 7:45 kick on the SEC Network. Vandy at 2-0 after a dominant second-half performance last week. They go into the half down to Virginia Tech, and they go out there and shut them out in the second half and dominate them on the road and get a big-time win. They travel to South Carolina, who's ranked number 11, also 2-0. South Carolina, the 5.5-point favorite here at home, over under 47.5, Joe. Do we get some more Diego magic here on the road?
I think we'll get some magical moments. I just don't think he'll be able to finish the game. I'm going to go South Carolina 35, Vandy 28. I'll take South Carolina minus 5.5. I'm going to take the over and just pray for points. I think this game has the potential to be very exciting. You have two quarterbacks. One, Lenore Sellers, just an athletic lunatic freak show. Can really make a lot of things happen. And at any moment, you could be watching like a Heisman moment highlight reel play. Then you have Diego Pavia, who has been backing up so far. I know it's only 2 games in, but Vandy's looked not like the old school Vandy. He's been talking about he wants to win a national title at Vandy. He's been talking all this crap, and I think he's, through 2 games has been backing it up. Vandy's next 2 games after this are home against Georgia State, who they lost to last year, and then Utah State is going to Nashville as well. This is a game, if Vandy pulls off the upset, they'll be 5-0 heading into that Alabama game. And Vandy might be a legitimate top 15 to top 10 team potentially, depending on what else happens in college football. But I just think ultimately South Carolina, at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the more athletic, the better quarterback. I think South Carolina has a little bit of a better roster as well, a little bit of a better team. Hosting this game, I think, is going to be a big difference too. So I'm going to go with South Carolina 35, Vandy 28. This is just a game, like I said, I'm taking the over out of principle. I don't even care. You could tell me all these stats about how the under is most likely to hit. Don't care. Still taking the over.
I agree. I really like the over in this one too, because I think it is a great matchup between 2 quarterbacks. I've been leading, I think, the Lenore Sellers hype train all off season. I feel like he's the player I've kind of talked about the most in a positive light. I've talked about Carson Beck in a negative light a lot this off season, but for what Diego Pavia has done, kind of transforming this Vanderbilt program and how awesome he's been in the early going. We saw him in flashes and spurts last year, how awesome he was. He has an argument, if he wins this game, that he's even the top quarterback in the SEC. That's over DJ Lagway. That's over Garrett Nussmeier. That's over Arch Manning. That's over John Mateer. He's put his money where his mouth is, and he's gone out there and played some really good football. So whatever this game goes, however this game goes, I just want to give him his flowers early on in the season, because I think this Vandy team is going to win not 6-6, not 7-5. I think that he could really go 8-4 for Vanderbilt football. That's pretty awesome. But with all that being said, I'm going to take South Carolina at home in this one. I do think Vandy has the tools, certainly, though, to keep it close. With Diego, it's cliche, but I'm never going to be ruling out that team, I think. I think they're always going to be competitive and in these ball games. But for this scenario, I think it's one of those coin flip type of games where you go with the home team. I think maybe whoever has the ball last, or the defense makes a huge stop thanks to the home crowd. I think we see something like that in this one, and you got to just tip your cap to the home team. But I definitely like Vandy to cover that 5.5. I'll go 34-31 South Carolina, Vandy plus 5.5, and over 47.5, just like you said. All right, our final 2 picks of the week. Dog of the day, lock of the week. We each went 2-0 on our picks last week. Let's see if we can double down. Your pick last week was 6.5, which is still a pretty big outright dog to win. What do you got for us this week, Joe? Anything crazy just like last week?
Yeah, this week not as crazy. I'm looking through a lot of the games. I don't really like a whole lot of the home dogs. But that being said, I'm going with the Cal Golden Bears plus 2.5. Hosting Minnesota. Minnesota going across the country. I'm going to take Cal. That's a night game. I forget the quarterback's name, but he's a freshman. He was slinging the ball all over Oregon State opening weekend. I really like that. I think Cal's going to win the game outright. I think Minnesota's a good team. It's just we kind of talked about it last year with these Big Ten schools having to go all across the country in multiple time zones. I think it's just a tough travel spot for them. So I'm going with Cal plus 2.5 at home.
Yeah, I like Cal in that spot as well. Kind of a head-scratching line there. But I like Cal to get that one done. I'm going to go down to New Orleans with Tulane plus 1.5 at home versus Duke. Big story, one of the big stories of the offseason, Darian Mensah transfers from Tulane to Duke. He's now rumored to be arguably the highest paid quarterback in college football at north of $4 million from Duke. That's not including Arch Manning's NIL deals with Red Bull or Nike or whoever he has deals with, but just playing out money from the school. It sounds like Darian Mensah makes $4 million. So he transfers after a standout freshman year at Tulane. He goes to Duke. Tulane's got to have revenge on their mind in this spot, right, Joe? +1.5 here at home. All those players are basically like, you left us, you ditched us, we helped make you, we helped become the player that you are, and now you just leave us. Jake Retzloff there now at Tulane, a damn good quarterback in his own right. I think that's a big one, like one that the student section shows out for, the crowd shows out for, and they kind of go after Darian Mensah. And I like Darian Mensah a lot. I think he's a really good player, but we saw some of his flaws last week against a really good Illinois defense. I think Tulane's able to get this upset at home outright here, +1.5. I think that line's pretty telling as well. Give me the green wave to get the upset there. All right, and now time for our lock of the week. We also went 2-0 with this last week. You had your Texas Tech -47.5. They win by 48 over Kent State. And then I had Mizzou, Kansas over. It was 47.5. That game was in the 60s. I think that almost hit by halftime. So let's look to get back on track here. Go 2-0 again this week. Joe, who's your lock of the week?
So my lock of the week, I was monitoring the situation down in Philadelphia. Temple is hosting Oklahoma. I'm not going with that one. It's currently at 23.5. I'm just really nervous about.
Would you have taken it out?
I would have taken Temple to cover, yes.
Wow.
That's a spot with Oklahoma. You come off a big win against Michigan. You have Auburn next week. But sandwiched in between that, you have to go to Philadelphia for some reason to play the Temple Owls. I'm not saying that Temple's going to win the game, but I don't know why my phone just turned sideways. I haven't moved it all day. We're so close. We're so close, Beef. But I'm going – the lock of the week I'm going to pick is the Utah Utes at Wyoming, -23.5. I love Devin Dampier. I love this Utah team. I think they're going to smoke Wyoming. Wyoming beat Akron 10-0 to open up the season, who Akron just lost 66-0.
Wait, Akron has 0 points all season?
Yes. Akron has 0 points on the season. They lost 10-0 to Wyoming in week 1. On a Thursday night, and I don't know, like I just don't think Wyoming's good. Akron is clearly terrible, so I'm going to take Utah to cover here, the 23.5. I think it might be like I'm going to take the over as well, which is 48.5 in that game. I'm not counting that as my lock because I think Utah might put up 49 on their own. Wyoming is also 2-0, but they beat Akron on the road, and then they beat Northern Iowa, 31-7 last week. I think Utah, and this game being in Wyoming, Utah also plays at elevation. I don't think it's going to be a big factor. I love Devin Dampier. I think Utah's going to win this game to continue kind of showing everyone, hey, there's a reason why there's a 20 next to our name. But yeah, I was between that, the Temple Owls, who I'm not taking, and I was looking at Oregon -27.5 as well at Northwestern. The one thing that scares me there, noon kickoff. We talk about body clock games a lot. I'm not saying Oregon's not going to beat Northwestern, but 27.5 might be a little bit much for that kind of spot. So I'm going to end up settling on the Utah Utes -23.5.
Like that one as well. I think that's a very dominant Utah team, probably the best in the Big 12 for my money. One game that I was looking at before, and it kind of ties into who I actually have this week, it was the Georgia Southern versus Jacksonville State over a 57.5. Georgia Southern last week against USC gave up over 700 yards. And I forget who they played in week 1, but they gave up over 500. So a very poor defense there. And Jacksonville State is a team that can put up some points, I think. But my lock of the week this week, I am going to go with USC -21.5 at Purdue. Coming into the year, I was high on Lincoln Riley and USC taking a big leap this year in their second year in the Big Ten. They've played 2 inferior opponents early on in Missouri State and Georgia Southern, but the offense looks to be good. The offense looks to be cooking, and they've kind of taken that blueprint of let's get a few preseason games here under our belt before we get into conference play with some inferior opponents. And Jaden Mayava has looked great, and I don't care who you play. If you're playing a JV defense, you go out and put up over 700 yards up on the offensive end. That's an impressive feat. I don't think Purdue is going to have the firepower, the horsepower to keep up with this USC team. So I'm going to go USC -21.5 at Purdue for what they've shown on early in the season. I think this is a team that's probably going to win this game by 30+. So USC -21.5 there for my lock of the week. But that'll do it for week 3 of the college football picks and preview show here at Beef Up Front. As always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Got some great ranked matchups this week and a handful of other good matchups. we will be live with Fox Sports The Gambler up at Penn State this weekend for Penn State Villanova. So that should be exciting afternoon up there as well. But as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Check us out this week at Penn State and Villanova, and we will be talking to you next week.